I'm really mindful of the fact that all of you are Port Melbourne people or people who really care about this park, and that you probably know more about it than I do. So let me just position myself in that way very first up. And I'm also mindful of the fact that I'm sharing the panel and podium with experts in botany and experts in biodiversity, and I wouldn't claim to be in their league. So let me just be really candid about that. But let me say something else about this particular part of the world, because Janet Belitho has probably another reason for having invited me, and it's because I'm connected to the Auty family. And I can tell you that when you read the Auty family journal of Caroline, you can find a story that tells you about this part of the world that is fascinating. And it picks up on some of the things that you were saying, Gary, that route from Sandridge up to what is now known as Melbourne through the tea tree. I know that when my ancestor was sitting there in that tea tree, she was very glad of its protective cover or shield from Aboriginal people who she was frightened of. I can tell you that when my ancestors stood in what is effectively your bay, our bay, they would note that the fish were biting at their ankles and their toes. This place was extraordinary, and it's a terrible thing to think about what we've done to it, and others will talk about that. I thought, as I was listening to what Gary was saying, what could I contribute here today, because I was going to talk about some of those things, and that map is a wonderful thing. That map is a wonderful thing. And maps, of course, are extraordinarily useful. As you embark on what's going to happen with Westgate Park and Fisherman's Bend, and think about the challenges that that presents for all of you in making your park something that is absolutely central to our understanding of this part of the world, there are some fantastic opportunities. And I just want to talk about those from a background that has involved some interpretation in parks and training people in that, and running curriculum in it in another life. It seems like many lives ago. But it seems to me that there's a fantastic opportunity for this park to be more and bigger and better than the 34 acres that I just witnessed in the UK, in the US Central Park. Our biodiversity is extraordinary if we can think about the ways in which we can reframe the park in that way. The fact that we have such a unique biodiversity in this country and in this part of the world and in wetlands is something that's an extraordinary challenge, and obviously something that many of you will think about. I came into this job and I was told by a lot of young environmentalists and people who know well what the problems are, that we need to think about how we're going to inspire people to do what they need to do about biodiversity, inspire us to think about the way nature is part of everything we do, inspire people to think about ecosystem services as the things that make us capable of breathing and living, and we need to educate people about it. Now, I think that's true, but I think that there's ways and ways of doing it, and you are on the cusp of something here that is has enormous potential. If what you can do with Westgate Park is to inspire that through bringing people into it, exposing them to what you're doing, showing them what you have done, showing them the extraordinary success that you've achieved down here, then there'll be something to be said for that for generations to come. And people will be talking about their ancestors like I just talked about the Liardos. This is a bit of a pivotal moment, I think. I think that there's an opportunity to be picking up on the wetlands story, there's an opportunity to be picking up on the biodiversity capacity, there's the work that's already been done, there's piggybacking on that from what people have already contributed, and there's ways in which we can inspire Melbourne to think about this part of the world as not a swamp or a marsh, and not a sewer pit, and not something that we don't care enough about to take photographs of. If Westgate Park can be that, Westgate Park can be something for all of us, something that will be valued well beyond what you're thinking about in this particular part of the world. Can I just say that we've been all over Victoria in my office and talked to people about wetlands and talked to people about biodiversity, and we've seen an extraordinarily growing interest in what that means. If you stand and talk to people on the edge of a wetlands in places like the Wimmera, up there at Lake Clare or whatever over in the Mallee, Lake Clare, you will find them talking about bringing back the brolgas, and you'll find them talking about the frog species, and you'll find them talking about sitting on the veranda of their house and hearing that noise, that cacophony, come out of the wetlands and up to them into their lives and change the way they think about things and renew their commitment to the environment. This park can be those things. This park is thinking about being those things, and the people who've already shown us around it have clearly committed to that. Can I say, as the Commissioner in this job, coming into it in 2009, I knew nothing about Westgate Park, and I probably know a little bit more about it now than I did then. But it's been evident to me when we were taken down around the park that there's the capacity to bring people into it, to educate and share, to generate interest, and to make sure that people recognise this part of the world as something that is absolutely pivotal to our understanding of Melbourne. If you think about interpretation of the park, and if you think about the ways that you might draw universities into what you're doing, there is something that can in fact be done to exploit what is happening in universities in all of the interpretive skills training that's going on, all of the disciplines that are bringing together the museums, the botanic gardens, the people who care about ecology. And if what you are able to do with this park is present an interpretive centre on the ground about wetlands, which inspires people to come back and back and back and bring it up to what it can be, which is an international best practice, there will be the capacity for this particular park to be linked to universities that are already doing this work, to Parks Victoria that knows the meaning of it and the usefulness of it, and I think that there's an extraordinary opportunity for that as well. And let me say that I think it's not just about one university, and it's not just about universities, it's about all the things that are inspired by that. The course that I taught was in fact, we generated, was at Deakin University, and it was called the Graduate Certificate in Environment and Heritage Interpretation, which was a mouthful, and most of the Aboriginal people who did it at the end of it said that they thought it was basically about telling stories. And that's exactly right. That's exactly what it's about. It's using maps like Gary's map to tell a story about what we've done to the river. We've re-engineered it, it's changed, it's different, it's difficult to imagine or have a memory of what it was. But if we start to think about how we use those things for interpretation down here in what you're doing, I think that there's an enormous capacity to be putting this on the map as one of those great emblematic achievements of interpretation. And I'd be urging you to be thinking about that as you're working out what you're going to do with the park, particularly in the light of Fisherman's Bend being developed. And can I say one other thing about that, apart from it being potentially an international best practice and potentially using all those skills and crafts. We know that the grasslands over there to the west of Melbourne is going to be the subject of development. We know that the government needs to buy back what it wants to use as the parks over there. Having toured that region, there's the capacity to link these things. There's the capacity to link the education, the disciplinary commitment, the way in which we think about biodiversity, the courses that we might consider for interpretation, and there's the capacity to say about the grasslands to the west that it's linked to what's happening here. And no doubt when Gary was talking about grasslands in that great big looping arch of what the river then was, there's that ability to think about it as all connected, as threaded together, as married up, as linked, so that you're linking what you do here with what's happening along the Werribee, that wonderful biolinks work along the Werribee River that we've been privileged to be told about, the fantastic capacity for the grasslands, and to think about Melbourne as other than it is at the moment a development paradise. If you think about those links and you consider what you can do here with what you've got, with what Werribee's got, with what the grassland looks like, the whole of the west of Melbourne is capable of being changed to something other and, in my view, better. All the others at this panel will talk about better, good, better, best. They'll talk about the skills they bring from their disciplines. I'm only talking about what I see as an overview. But I reckon there's the capacity to marry these things up, to bring the community together in ways that is clearly open, and people want to be brought into this. There's no doubt from what we've dealt with people talking to us, that people from the Merri, people from the Werribee, people from the Maribyrnong, people from all of these places involved in Friends and other achievements want to be part of what you're doing. And I'd be urging you to think about your park, think about this park as part of the breadth, part of the broad understanding of what we can look at here. There'll be people here who think about catchments, there'll be people here who think about engineering, there'll be people here who think about biodiversity. My thought on this is find the links and engage the public. And you're already doing that down here, but I think that there's a capacity to be engaging the public across a really wide terrain for some fantastic achievements.